The sun rose slowly over the broken temple, light slipping through cracked walls like golden threads. Jack stood at the edge of the ruins, watching the horizon, his body still sore, but his heart steadier than it had been since he arrived on this world. Inside, Saranya slept wrapped in an old woven cloak, her breathing slow and calm, for once untouched by duty or fear. But peace never lasted long on Karina. A sharp noise broke the stillness, a high-pitched hum growing louder from the sky above. Jack turned instantly, eyes narrowing as he spotted the shape of a royal sky cruiser descending through the clouds. Its design sleek and aggressive, glowing with the mark of House Velyar. He ran back inside the temple, heart racing. "Saranya, wake up!" She sat up. Fast, already knowing, already feeling it. They found us before either could move. The cruiser landed outside, and a projection lit the inner walls. A tall figure appeared in golden lights. It was Vale. Her brother, but not dressed for war this time. No blade, no armor, just the ceremonial robe of an heir. His voice filled the chamber. "Saranya, daughter of Velyar, come out. We must speak before the council ends this with blood." Jack looked at her, ready to run, ready to fight again if he had to. But Saranya's expression surprised him. She wasn't afraid. She was calm, her jaw tight, her shoulders square. She walked to the open archway and stepped into the light. Jack followed close behind. Vale stood on the ground before them, arms folded. Behind him were council guards, but their weapons were not raised. The air felt strange, not hostile, but tense, waiting. "You broke every code," Vale said sharply. "You fled, you stole a ship, you made it outside the law." Saranya raised a hand, silencing him, her voice clear, loud, not in English, not translated, just pure Karinari. But Jack understood, not the words, but the strength behind them. Then she turned to Jack, slowly and calmly took his hand and raised it high before them all. "She chooses," one of the council elders said in surprise, stepping forward from the cruiser. "She invokes the old right." Vale's eyes widened. "That law is dead." "No," the elder corrected. "It is forgotten, not dead. The old right was a path once used by nobles who wished to marry beneath their caste. It was risky, permanent, and almost never used, but it was absolute. If a woman of royal blood invoked it before witnesses, her choice overrode all other laws. "You're serious?" Jack whispered, barely able to believe it. Saranya looked at him, her voice soft. "Now?" "There is no mistake." The elder stepped forward again, raising a ceremonial seal. "Do you both accept the bond, knowing it cannot be undone by family, by court, or by war?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Yes." Saranya's hand squeezed his. "Yes." The seal flashed with golden light, and in that moment, it was done. Vale turned away, defeated not by force, not by violence, but by a sister who chose her own path. The cruiser left without a fight, the guards vanishing into the sky. Later, back inside the ruins, Saranya and Jack sat by the old warrior statue once more. The air still, the future uncertain, but theirs strange. She said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "A machine failed, and still brought me truth." Jack smiled. "Guess some mistakes are meant to happen." Saranya closed her eyes. Not a mistake anymore, no longer bound by translation errors, broken laws, or old fear. Now, they belong to each other by choice, by voice, by a bond no device could ever mistranslate again. The silence in the ceremonial chamber was sharp, like the edge of a blade. Jack stood there, still breathing hard from the duel, but now stripped of his weapons. He had been taken from the arena straight into a polished stone room lit by glowing crystals. There were no guards, no voices, just the weight of ancient eyes watching him from hidden walls. He turned slowly, studying the space. And that's when he saw them again. The three women, standing side by side, dressed now in formal robes instead of armor, but no less dangerous. They said nothing at first, only looked at him with unreadable faces. Then the silver-skinned one stepped forward, her eyes burning like fire trapped in ice. "You dishonor us," she said coldly, her voice sharp and proud. "You are not one of us, yet by law we are bound." Jack opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand. "You will not speak unless asked." The second woman, the one with crimson tattoos, leaned against a pillar, watching like a predator who wasn't hungry yet but could be. Her smirk was playful, but there was no warmth in it. She clicked her tongue and said, "He doesn't look strong enough to satisfy even one of us, let alone three." Jack frowned, but stayed silent, remembering what his commander said. Any wrong word could start a war. The third woman, still masked, said nothing at all. She stood like a shadow, still as stone, yet somehow more present than the others. Jack met her eyes through the mask's narrow slits, and for a moment something passed between them, curiosity, maybe, or quiet anger, he couldn't tell. A door opened behind him, and a high voice entered. Robes trailing across the floor, he carried a scroll made from shimmering hide and read aloud the terms of the binding trials. For 7 nights the human would be tested by each wife. One by one he must not fail, not insult, not retreat. Only by their full acceptance would the bond be complete. And the blood price paid. If he failed, he would die. That part was said softly but clearly. Jack was taken to a large chamber carved from dark crystal, lit by faint blue glowstones. A fire pit in the center cast flickering shadows on the walls. This would be his new home during the trials, a space between judgment and survival. The silver-skinned bride was first. As custom demanded, she entered without a word, her expression still hard, her steps loud on the crystal floor. She dropped a heavy training spear in front of him and crossed her arms. "Show me why you were allowed to take my future," she said. Jack picked up the spear slowly, his muscles still aching from the duel. She attacked without warning, sweeping his legs out and knocking him flat. Pain shot through his back, but he rolled up quickly, eyes locked on her face. They circled each other, testing moves, trading blows not with rage, but with something else beneath it. A need to understand, maybe, or to be understood. She moved like lightning, but Jack learned fast, adjusting his steps, using rhythm instead of power. After the third exchange, he blocked her strike and twisted her arm, just enough to drop her weapon, but not enough to hurt her. Then he stepped back and threw his own spear aside. Hands open for a second, she stood frozen, breathing hard, her lips slightly parted. Then she looked down at her weapon, then at him, and slowly, without a word, turned and walked out. No insults, no praise, just silence. Jack stood alone in the chamber, the fire's heat licking his skin. He didn't know if that meant he passed the first trial or just delayed the judgment. But for now, he was still alive. Somewhere behind the walls, the next bride was already waiting. The game had begun, and the rules weren't written for humans. Jack was still sweating when the wall shifted, sliding apart without sound, revealing a new path made of glass and vines. He looked behind him, but the crystal chamber was already closing, sealing him off from the firelight. Only forward now. Always forward. His feet moved slowly, cautious with every step. As the vines seemed to shimmer and breathe under the floor, a soft humming sound came from ahead. Strange but oddly peaceful, like a song played through water. Then laughter, light and mocking, bounced through the air. He turned a corner, and there she was, the second bride, sitting cross-legged in midair, floating lazily, as if the rules of gravity were just a suggestion to her. She grinned as her feet touched the floor, her crimson tattoos glowing faintly under the bioluminescent leaves above them. Well, little human," she purred. stretching like a cat, waking from a nap, still breathing after my sister's test. Maybe you're more fun than I thought. Jack didn't answer. Still remembering the command from the first bride, don't speak unless asked. But this one didn't seem to care about that rule. She circled him, her bare feet silent, her fingers tapping her chin. Let's play a game, she whispered, and snapped her fingers. Suddenly, the world around them shifted. And Jack was no longer standing on vines, but in a vast black room, stars swirling above and below like he was floating in space. She stood across from him now, holding two blades made of light, spinning them in her hands like toys. If you can catch me, I'll admit you're not boring, she said, then vanished. Jack cursed under his breath, turning fast, trying to track her movements by sound, by air, by instinct. She appeared behind him, tapped his shoulder, then vanished again with a giggle. He wasn't fighting this time. He was chasing shadows, but then he stopped, breathed, closed his eyes, and remembered her rhythm-light steps, playful patterns, never in a straight line. When she struck again, he was ready, grabbing her wrist mid-air and pulling her toward him with a sudden twist. They tumbled across the space, landing hard. Her laughter cut short as she stared at him. Breathless, Jack didn't hurt her, didn't restrain her. He just held her gaze and said, "You asked me to catch you." Didn't say what happens next. She blinked, then smirked slowly, like someone tasting something unexpected but not unpleasant. "You're clever," she said, almost whispering to clever. The stars around them faded. The room vanished, and they were back among the glowing vines. She walked past him, her fingers trailing across his shoulder, soft like wind. "Be careful, human," she murmured. "Not all of us want to be caught." Then she was gone, fading into the green, her laughter echoing again in the distance, playful but darker now, maybe even a little shaken. Jack stood alone once more, not sure if he passed or failed. He only knew he was still alive, still walking, and that each of them was testing something deeper than strength. They wanted to know what he was made of: mind, heart, soul, all of it. And the third one? The one who hadn't spoken. She would be the hardest of them all. Somewhere in the silence, she was waiting, not to test him, but to see if he'd survive the truth behind her eyes. The path to the third trial was not marked. There were no glowing signs, no doors, no voices, only a still hallway with dark walls that pulsed like something alive. Jack followed it with careful steps, but every footfall sounded too loud. Like the corridor itself didn't want him there. He had faced combat, clever illusions, games, and insults. But this bride, was different from the start. She had spoken no words, only stared at him through her mask. There had been no anger in her eyes, but no kindness either, only silence, like she was waiting for something no one else could see. Jack entered a chamber that didn't feel like part of the palace. The air was cold, and the walls were covered in symbols he couldn't read. No light came from crystals this time, only a soft, natural glow that hung in the air like mist. She was already there, standing in the center, barefoot, motionless, her hands folded before her like a statue. He took one step forward, and the mist grew heavier. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Then a whisper, not from her mouth, but from the room itself, slid into his ear. "Do not lie," it said, "or you'll be swallowed whole." He froze, heart pounding, unsure if it was part of the test or something worse. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed to a stone seat across from her. He sat. The stone was freezing under him, biting into his skin like ice. And then the questions began. But she didn't speak them. Somehow, they formed directly. Inside his mind, sharp, direct, personal. What is your deepest shame? Who have you failed? What do you fear at night when no one sees you? Jack gritted his teeth, trying to stay calm. This wasn't a test of fighting or cleverness. It was something else, deeper, quieter, and far more dangerous. He could lie, but the mist around him pulsed every time he tried to speak a false word. The chamber seemed to know, so he spoke the truth even when it hurt. He told her how he once froze in battle, how a teammate died because of his hesitation. He told her about his fears, about not being strong enough to carry Earth's name in the stars. He even told her about his loneliness, buried under every mission, behind every smile. And the more he spoke, the quieter the mist became when he finally stopped, breathing heavy. His voice dry and broken, she stepped forward, slowly. Her movements like falling water. Without a word, she reached up and removed her mask. For the first time, he saw her face. She was beautiful, yes, but not in the way the others were. There was something human in her sadness. In her eyes, a scar ran across her jaw, old and faded. She looked at him not like a warrior, not like a wife, but like someone who had been waiting for someone else to understand. She reached out and touched his chest gently, just above his heart, then turned and left the chamber. Disappearing into the fog, she hadn't spoken a single word aloud. But her silence had said everything. Jack stood there long after she left. Unsure what had just happened, he had been broken, laid bare. Yet somehow he felt stronger. Not because he passed the trial, he wasn't even sure if he did, but because she saw him and didn't look away. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a mirror to their pain, their fire, their secrets, and for the first time, he wondered if this path wasn't forced on him at all. Maybe, just maybe, it was meant for him from the beginning. Jack didn't sleep that night, not because he wasn't tired, his body was aching, and his mind was overloaded, but because something inside him had changed. The trials were meant to test him, maybe break him, maybe judge him, but now they felt like something else entirely. Each woman was a storm in her own way, but beneath all that power was pain and loneliness. He sat alone by a glowing pool just outside his chamber, watching alien fish glide through the light. The silence was different here, not threatening like before, but soft, heavy, like it was asking him to listen. And so he did, not to voices, but to himself, until footsteps broke the moment the first bride appeared. The silver-skinned warrior with sharp eyes and a proud spine. She did not wear armor now, only a plain wrap across her chest and shoulders. There was no blade in her hand, but her presence was still sharp. Jack stood slowly, unsure of what to expect. She didn't speak right away, just walked past him and sat by the water. He hesitated, then sat beside her, a respectful distance away. For a long time, they said nothing, just listened to the soft ripple of the pool. Then she spoke, voice low and steady. "When you won in the arena, I wanted to kill you," she said. "Not because you beat him, but because you ruined everything I prepared for." Jack didn't look at her, just listened. "He was not my choice, but he was predictable," she continued. "I knew how to deal with him, how to survive him, how to control him." She turned to him now, eyes shining like metal in the low light. "But you don't play by our rules, and that terrifies me." Jack looked at her and finally asked, "So why are you here?" She laughed softly, not cruelly this time, but with a tired kind of honesty. "Because I need to know if you are a danger, or a path to something better." Then she reached into her wrap and pulled out a small blade, not to attack, but to offer. She placed it between them. The handle pointed toward him. "In our culture, a wife gives this to her mate only if she accepts him fully," she said. "You are not one of us, and you never will be. But you didn't try to break us, you endured us." Jack picked up the blade slowly, turning it over in his hands. It was light, perfectly balanced, and etched with 3 symbols he didn't recognize. He looked at her, and nodded once. No words needed. She stood, brushed off her robes, and said, "The others will come too, one by one. If you're ready." He watched her walk away into the shadows. And then another voice spoke, not from the path behind, but from above, the second bride. The crimson-tattooed trickster was lying upside down on a curved tree branch, arms behind. Her head, legs swinging slowly in the air. "You didn't even flinch," she said, smirking. "Impressive," Jack sighed. "Do you all follow me now?" She laughed and dropped down beside him with a smooth flip, landing gracefully. "I was curious," she said, then looked down at the blade in his hand. "So, she gave it to you, huh?" He nodded. "Then I guess I better stop pretending," she whispered. She stepped closer, her usual playfulness gone, replaced by something softer. "You passed my game, Jack," she said, "but I didn't expect you to understand me." He tilted his head. "Understand what?" She looked down. "Almost embarrassed that I make jokes because I'm afraid to be serious. And that I test people because I want someone to prove they won't run." She placed a second blade beside the first one. This one curved and glowing faintly red. "No tricks, no illusions." She said, "You earned this." Then she looked up at the stars above, her voice barely a whisper. "If you leave now, I'll be furious. But I'll also understand." Jack didn't move, didn't speak. Just looked at the two blades now sitting beside him, symbols of trust, of choice, of something heavier than duty. And somewhere in the dark, the third one watched, still waiting, still silent. She hadn't given her sign yet, but when she did, it would mean everything. Jack didn't know when he fell asleep. The blades from the first two brides still rested beside him, glowing softly in the dark. He dreamed of falling not through space, but through water, through silence, through memory. Then he woke up, not in his chamber, not near the pool, but in a place he had never seen before. The sky was black with no stars, just waves of dim light that moved like slow clouds. He was standing on soft ground that pulsed gently beneath his feet. Like it was breathing, he turned, but saw no doors, no walls, only endless space. And then she appeared, the third bride, still masked, still silent, but something about her presence had changed. She stood across from him, her bare feet touching nothing, her long robes trailing into mist. Jack felt his breath catch not in fear, but in something deeper. A pressure in his chest he couldn't explain. She lifted her hand, and he was suddenly no longer standing, but kneeling, unable to move. It wasn't force that held him. It was weight, grief, sorrow. Something ancient pressing down on him, and then the world around them changed again. They stood in a memory, not his, but hers, a battlefield, broken and burning, bodies everywhere. She was younger, still masked, standing among the dead, her hands trembling. Voices screamed around her, accusing her, blaming her, and yet she said nothing. Jack watched helplessly as the masked girl fell to her knees and pressed her hands over a fallen child's chest. The child didn't move, the memory shattered like glass. And they were standing in another moment, a council chamber, harsh lights, angry voices and alien tongues, her face exposed now. But Jack saw something terrible. Her eyes were dead, cold, lifeless. They called her a traitor, a failure. A shame to the bloodline, she didn't argue, didn't cry, just bowed her head. The scene faded again, and she was back in front of Jack, the current version of her, older, stronger. But still silent, she reached up and slowly removed her mask one final time, not as a formality, not as a ritual, but as an offering. Her face was calm, but her eyes held storms. She didn't need to speak. Jack stepped closer, gently lifted his hand, and placed it over her heart. It was beating fast, too fast. She was terrified. "I see you," he said softly, "not as a trial, not as a law, But as a person, she blinked, and one tear escaped down her cheek. Then she pulled a blade from inside her robe, a simple one. No glow, no symbol, just steel. She offered it without a word. Hands shaking slightly, Jack didn't reach for it. "Not yet. Only if you want to," he said. "This isn't about law anymore." She looked down, then slowly nodded. Placing the blade in his hand, he accepted it, then stepped back, giving her space, and in that quiet moment, something broke not between them, but around them. The mist lifted, the ground solidified, and the real world returned. They stood now in a sacred hall, watched by unseen eyes. 3 blades rested before him now, one from each of them. He had passed the final test, not by power, but by choice. The air shifted again, and the high voice's call echoed through the chamber. "All 3 have chosen," the voice declared. "The final ceremony shall begin at dusk." But Jack didn't care about ceremonies anymore. He looked at her, at all of them now standing behind him, and for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like part of something, something real, something unexpected, and maybe something worth staying for. The sun on their world didn't set like Earth's. It drifted behind clouds of silver gas, casting long golden rays across the cliffs below the ceremonial spire. Jack stood at the edge, wind brushing his face, robes unfamiliar but no longer uncomfortable. Behind him, the entire city watched, silent, waiting, judging. The 3 brides stood a few steps away, each dressed in their own tradition. The silver-skinned warrior wore full armor, her blade sheathed across her back not as a threat, but as honor. The tattooed one wore nothing ceremonial at all, only her laughter and confidence, hands on hips, eyes sharp as ever, and the masked bride, now unmasked forever, wore the simplest thing of all, a plain robe, eyes steady, no longer afraid to be seen. A high priestess stepped forward, her voice echoing through the wind. She spoke the final words of the ancient bond, a union not just of people, but of fate, of balance, of law and choice. Then came the question meant only for Jack. "Human, do you accept this path not because you are bound, but because you choose it freely?" He didn't speak right away, not because he doubted, but because he understood what it meant now. These weren't prizes, and he wasn't a conqueror. They were warriors, survivors, leaders, and each had offered him something no one else ever had. Not love, not devotion, but trust. So he stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and spoke clearly. "I choose this," he said, "not because I want to fight, but because they saw me, and I saw them." Then he looked at each of them, eyes locked, no words needed. They nodded in return, one with pride, one with fire, one with peace. The wind howled, and the crowd broke into cheers. Not wild, not explosive, but respectful. Like the silence before battle, the bond was sealed not by law, but by will. And for the first time since the duel, Jack felt no weight on his shoulders. Later that night, when the celebration faded and the lights dimmed, he found himself standing on the palace balcony, looking up at their twin moons. One by one, they came to him, not with ceremony, not with command, but with quiet understanding. They sat beside him, no longer brides of duty, but women of choice. Each touched his shoulder, not with possession, but with connection. Jack didn't know what the future would bring. Earth was still far away. Politics would still be messy, and trust between worlds would take time. But here, in this moment, he wasn't a soldier, a tool, or a stranger. He was one of them, chosen, not forced, bound, not trapped. As the night deepened and the stars above shifted, Jack leaned back and smiled for the first time in days. Not because he had survived, but because he had found something worth surviving for.